Welcome back to the Deep End. Today we are pulling a book off the shelf that honestly might just be the most intimidating little paperback in existence.
That's not an exaggeration. It's true.
It's been sitting on nightstands for nearly 100 years, and, people usually have one of two reactions to it.
Hmm.
Either they cherish it as the thing that completely saved their faith, or they are, frankly, absolutely terrified of it.
That is a very fair assessment. It's a book that really should come with a warning label.
We are talking about My Utmost for His Highest by Oswald Chambers, and if you're listening to this thinking, okay, a daily devotional, nice, comforting thoughts to start my morning, you really need to hit pause on that assumption.
Immediately, yeah.
Because as we went through all the source material, the history, the theology, the analysis, it became so obvious that comfort is not the goal here.
No, comfort is definitely not the goal. If I had to use a medical analogy, based on the text, most devotionals act like a mild painkiller.
A bandage, maybe.
A bandage, exactly. They cover the wound. My utmost for his highest is surgery.
Surgery. Okay, that sounds painful.
Invasive surgery. It cuts. It's designed to go after the root causes of our spiritual malaise, not just treat the symptoms. The sources we read describe it as stern, uncompromising, and even dangerous.
Dangerous is a strong word for a religious book. I mean, usually we reserve that for, banned political manifestos, so why dangerous?
Because it's dangerous to your ego. That's why. It's dangerous to your complacency, and it is specifically designed to be dangerous to that little part of you that wants to run your own life while just slapping a Christian label on it.
The part that wants to have it both ways.
It refuses to let you have it both ways. It forces a choice.
And yet, despite that intensity, or, maybe because of it, the influence of this book is just staggering.
It's immense.
We're looking at a book cited by Billy Graham, by Charles Stanley. It's arguably the most influential devotional in all of evangelical history. It has not been out of print since 1927.
Millions and millions of copies. Which is even more remarkable when you dig into the origin story. Because, and this is a key point, if you look at the author on the cover, Oswald Chambers, strictly speaking, he never wrote this book.
That was one of the first things that just jumped out at me in the research. You have this picture in your head of a guy sitting in a cozy study in Scotland, carefully crafting these beautiful little essays. But that is not what happened.
Not at all. Oswald Chambers was an itinerant preacher, a teacher. He died very young, just 43 years old, while he was serving as a chaplain to British troops in Egypt during World War I.
Wow, 43.
He never saw My Utmost for his highest. He never even knew it would exist.
So physically, where did the text come from? How do we have these words?
We have him because of his wife, Biddy. This is the part of the story that just doesn't get enough attention. Biddy was a court stenographer before they got married.
Oh, wow.
And she had this incredible skill. She could take shorthand at something like 250 words per minute.
250? That's faster than most people can even think, let alone talk.
It's blindingly fast. So for years, whenever Oswald was lecturing at the Bible Training College they ran in London, or later, when he was giving talks to those soldiers in the desert camps in Egypt, Biddy was just sitting there.
Capturing everything.
Capturing a live transcript. Every lecture, every sermon, every little devotional talk to the troops, she took it all down, verbatim.
That context really, really shifts how you read it, doesn't it? These weren't polished literary essays that he labored over for a quiet Sunday afternoon audience.
Exactly. These were urgent talks. They were given to young students who were preparing for a life of ministry, or to men who were literally facing the horrors of the First World War in the Egyptian desert. That's where that soldierly discipline in the text comes from.
It's not flowery.
No, it's urgent. It's direct. And after Oswald died, Biddy spent the rest of her life, we're talking decades, painstakingly compiling and transcribing these shorthand notes into the 366 daily readings that we have today.
It's almost like a partnership between the living and the dead. I mean, he provided the voice, but she provided the legacy.
That's a beautiful way to put it.
So our mission for this deep dive is to really figure out why this specific compilation has this incredible power. We want to understand how it pushes the reader not just to do more religious stuff, but to actually genuinely love Christ more deeply.
And we're going to do that by moving through what the sources really highlight as the 4 core themes, or we could call them movements, of the book.
Okay, what are they?
First, the crisis of surrender, then the trap of service, after that, the reality of drudgery, and finally, the joy of identification.
Before we hit those movements, though, I want to stop on the title itself. My Utmost for His Highest, it's become such a cliche in Christian circles, right? You see it on T-shirts and coffee mugs.
It's been a bit domesticated.
But what does it actually mean? Because I think it's often totally misunderstood.
Oh, completely. It's often captivated by what you might call the Protestant work ethic. People hear my utmost, and they immediately think, okay, grind set. Hustle culture for Jesus. I need to work harder, burn out for God. I need to earn this.
The hamster wheel of religious performance?
Precisely. But Chambers explicitly and repeatedly rejects that. The utmost isn't a bid for merit. It's not about trying to earn God's favor. It's a response.
A response to what?
A response to the highest. The highest refers to God's supreme holiness, his absolute sovereignty. The idea is, because he is the highest, the only rational, loving response is to give him my absolute best, my utmost. It's an offering of gratitude, not a payment for services rendered.
That distinction is so key because my first impression, and I think a lot of people feel this, is that the tone can feel incredibly stern, uncompromising. You open it up on January 1st expecting a Happy New Year, you're doing great, and instead you get hit with this immediate challenge to your will.
That's the Chambers signature. He fights relentlessly against what he calls utilitarian Christianity.
Utilitarian, meaning practical, useful.
Yes. He isn't interested in whether you are useful to God in a business sense.
Yeah.
He doesn't care about your stats, your metrics of success. He cares about whether you are intimate with God. He's pushing for a relationship, but a relationship that requires, well, everything you have.
Okay, so let's get into the mechanics of that relationship. This leads us right into that first major movement you mentioned that the text focuses on, the crisis of surrender.
This is the foundation. It's the front door.
Yeah.
If you don't get this part, the rest of the book is just going to sound like noise, or worse, like condemnation.
And the word that keeps popping up again and again in the text isn't just surrender, it's a stronger word, it's abandonment.
Abandonment, yeah.
Now, usually when we think of surrender or abandonment in a religious context, we think about giving up bad things.
Right.
Vices. Stop lying, stop stealing, stop looking at the wrong thing.
That's goats.
Yeah, the list of don'ts. But the sources suggest Chambers is talking about something much, much more fundamental than that.
He is. For Chambers, giving up sins is just the baseline. That's just basic morality. That's not the goal. Abandonment is giving up the right to yourself.
The right to yourself. That is a heavy phrase. What does that actually look like practically?
It's the core of the whole issue. You see it right there in the January 1st entry. He says, shut out every other consideration and keep yourself before God for this one thing only, my utmost for his highest.
Shut out every other consideration.
Every single one. He argues that we usually try to negotiate with God. We treat our lives like a pie chart.
Okay, yeah, I can see that. I give God the Sunday morning slice of the pie and maybe the charity slice.
Right. Lord, I will give you my Sunday mornings and I will tithe. I'll give you 10% of my income and I'll even give you my bad habits. But my career path, my relationships, my right to decide where I live, my right to worry about my kids, that's mine.
We want a partnership.
We want a partnership, not a lordship. We want God as a consultant, not a CEO.
A limited liability partnership, maybe?
Exactly. And Chambers argues for what he calls a great divide. He says there comes a point, a crisis point, where you have to stop debating with God. You have to stop negotiating the terms and just surrender. You hand over the title deed to your entire life. No clauses, no exceptions.
There's a really vivid and kind of unsettling image he uses for this, the white funeral. This shows up in the January 15th reading. It sounds a bit morbid, doesn't it?
It does, but it's a striking image for a reason. He talks about the burial of the old life. He says you cannot enter into true sanctification, which is just a theological term for being made holy without this death. It is quite literally the funeral of your own independence.
The funeral of independence. I mean, that goes against every single thing our modern culture teaches us. We're taught to be autonomous, self-actualized, the captain of our own ship.
Which is exactly why this book is so countercultural, even 100 years later. Chambers has this incredibly insightful psychological observation. He says we tend to be sacredly playing the fool with our souls.
What on earth does he mean by that, sacredly playing the fool?
He means we skirt around the cemetery. We walk right up to the edge of total surrender. We sing the hymns about I surrender all. We might even cry. We feel the emotion of it.
But we refuse to actually get in the coffin.
We refuse to actually die. We refuse to let go of our right to run the show. We treat it like a game. We want the power of the resurrection without the pain of the crucifixion.
He mentions dying to our rag rights. I love that phrasing. It's so visceral.
Rag rights. That's such a classic Chambers phrase, isn't it? He means our virtues, our sense of, I'm a pretty good person, our religious resume, the things we're proud of. He calls them rags. worthless. He says we have to hold a funeral for all of that. You have to be willing to let that old you, the one who demands to be in control, the one who demands to be recognized, the one who is so proud of its own goodness, die completely.
And a big part of this, which I found really helpful in the source material, is the distinction he makes between will and sentiment. Because I think so many of us, myself included, wait to feel surrendered. We wait for this warm, fuzzy, angelic feeling that makes us want to give everything to God.
And Chambers says, if you wait for that feeling, you will wait forever. Surrender, according to the text, is a transaction of will, not of sentiment. It's a choice. It's a cold, hard, conscious decision. It might feel awful.
It's not an emotion.
It is not an emotion. The emotions might follow or they might not, but the decision is an act of the will.
He talks about the crisis in this context.
Yes. He says God often engineers a crisis in our lives, what he calls a providential crisis, where we are forced to decide. We're backed into a corner where we can no longer have it both ways. We can't just slide into surrender. We can't drift into holiness. We have to come to a point where we look at two paths and we say, I choose God's way even if it hurts. I choose his will even if I don't feel like it and don't understand it.
There is a practical application of this in the February 5th entry that really struck me. It's so concrete. He talks about giving up the right to choose your own scenery for your sacrifice.
That is such a profound point. We often have this romanticized, heroic view of serving God, don't we?
Absolutely. We think, okay, I'll surrender, and then I'll go be a heroic missionary in a remote jungle, and everyone will write articles about my incredible sacrifice.
We want the movie version of sacrifice. We want the swelling orchestral soundtrack and the slow-motion shot of us walking away from it all.
Yes.
Exactly. But Chambers asks, what if God wants you to be a doormat? What if his will for you is to serve in a way that is totally unnoticed, completely unappreciated, and frankly kind of humiliating? Are you willing to surrender your right to be the hero of your own story?
Are you willing to let God choose the scenery, even if that scenery is just a drab, obscure office building and the sacrifice involves changing diapers or filling out spreadsheets for 40 years?
That's the real test of the white funeral. Because dead people don't get to choose their burial plot.
Right.
And dead people don't care if they get the credit.
And that actually leads us perfectly into the second major section, because often the thing that stops us from that kind of total unheroic surrender isn't sin in the traditional sense. It's actually our service.
This is one of those provocative and frankly challenging ideas in the entire book. It's the one that really upsets a lot of people who are very, very active in church.
This is section 2, the trap of service versus intimacy. There's a quote from the January 18th reading that just stops you in your tracks. The greatest competitor of devotion to Jesus is service for him.
Just let that sink in for a moment. The greatest competitor is not the devil. It's not worldly pleasure or money or fame. It is service for him.
Why is that so shocking? I mean, we are trained from day one to think that a busy Christian is a good Christian. If your calendar is full, if you're at the church every night of the week, if you're running the food drive, leading the small group, you're winning at Christianity.
And Chambers comes along and says, not necessarily. In fact, that very busyness can be the thing that is destroying your actual relationship with God. He warns against what he calls spiritual wantoning.
Wantoning, that's an old word. It implies being loose or flirtatious.
Essentially, yes. He's saying we start flirting with spiritual success instead of keeping our eyes fixed on God. We fall in love with the work. We fall in love with the feeling of being useful, of being needed. We fall in love with the public affirmation we get for being such a good and faithful servant.
And in the process, we completely ignore the master.
And we ignore the master. It becomes a form of shop window Christianity.
For display.
Exactly. It's about living for the public eye versus what he calls the innermost of the innermost. Chambers is absolutely relentless on this point. He says God doesn't need you to do things for him as much as he wants to do his work through you. And there's a universe of difference between those two things.
There's another term he uses in this context that I find both brilliant and terrifying: amateur providence.
Yes. This is when we try to play God in other people's lives.
Explain that, because I think we do this constantly, and we do it under the guise of helping or loving.
We do. Amateur providence is when we look at someone else's life, maybe a friend, a child, our spouse, and we see them suffering or struggling. And our immediate, visceral, and seemingly noble instinct is, I must fix this. I must shield them from this pain. I must engineer a solution for them.
And that's bad. I mean, isn't that just being a good friend or a good parent?
According to Chambers, it can be spiritually destructive. He says when we do that, when we rush in to fix things, we often act as the thief.
A thief. How?
Two ways. First, we can steal their affection away from Jesus and center it on ourselves. We become the rescuer, the one they depend on. But even more dangerously, we might be preventing the very crushing that God is using in their life to make them into wine.
Wow. So by trying to stop their pain, by trying to solve their problem, we might actually be interfering with God's deeper work in their soul. We're getting in the way.
Precisely. He connects this to the Old Testament story of the prophet Samuel and his mentor Eli. This is in the January 30th entry. He calls it the dilemma of obedience. God told Samuel to deliver a devastating message of judgment to Eli. And Samuel, being a good protege, didn't want to say it. He didn't want to hurt his mentor.
Of course not.
But Chambers points out that sometimes our loyalty to God means we cannot prevent someone else's suffering. If you try to shield your Eli, the people you love, from God's necessary dealings, you become an obstruction to their spiritual growth. You're treating them like a project to be managed, not a soul that belongs to God.
That is an incredibly hard thing to hear, especially for anyone with a nurturing instinct. It feels almost cold. So if we aren't supposed to run around fixing everyone and playing amateur Providence, what are we supposed to do? Just sit there and watch the people we love suffer?
No, not at all. We engage in what Chambers calls intercessory introspection and the ministry of the interior.
Which sounds very fancy and theological. What does it mean in practice?
It means we become broken bread and poured out wine for them. Instead of active interference, we focus on active intercession. We pray, but not just a quick, God, please fix this situation so I don't have to worry about it anymore.
Right. The self-serving prayer.
Yes. We pray that God's perfect and sometimes painful will may be done in them, regardless of the cost to them or to us. Chambers makes this sharp distinction between active work and intercession. He says active work can actually be an evasion, a way to avoid the hard, silent work of concentrating on God on someone's behalf. True intercession is the real work. It's holding that person up before God and then having the faith to get out of the way.
It's trusting that God actually loves them more than I do.
And that God is infinitely more competent to handle their life than I am, which is, if we're honest, usually the part we actually doubt.
That's the kicker. Okay, so we've covered this radical surrender, and we've talked about the trap of even good service. But this all leads to the big how question. How do we actually live this way? How do we get to this level of surrender and trust, where we aren't micromanaging the universe? This brings us to Section 3, Sanctification and the Atonement.
This is the theological engine room of the whole book. If you strip away all the powerful metaphors and stark imagery, this is the mechanic that actually makes it run.
And Chambers has a really catchy, powerful phrase for this, which is impartation, not imitation.
Yes. This is a massive, massive paradigm shift for many Christians. Most of us, consciously or not, try to live the Christian life by imitation. We look at Jesus in the Gospels and we say, okay, Jesus was patient, so I will try really, really, really hard to be more patient. He was kind, so I will grit my teeth and be kind, even to this person who drives me crazy.
The old WWJD bracelet, what would Jesus do?
Right. And Chambers would say that approach is absolutely doomed to failure. It's exhausting, it's unsustainable, and ultimately it's impossible. You cannot imitate the Almighty. You cannot mimic the character of the infinite with your own finite fallen energy.
So if it's not imitation, what is impartation?
Impartation means receiving a gift. Chambers argues that sanctification, being made holy, isn't you drawing power from Jesus to go be holy on your own. It is Jesus himself being made holiness in you.
That's the July 23rd entry, right?
It is. He says the Christian life isn't you trying to copy Jesus. It's you allowing the actual life of Jesus to live itself out through your personality, your circumstances. Think of it like a power plant versus a battery. Imitation is trying to be a battery. You charge up on Sunday morning and hope you have enough juice to last the week.
And you're usually running on empty by Tuesday afternoon.
Usually. Impartation is being plugged directly into the power grid. It's not about your capacity. It's about your connection. It's a takeover. He says it's a new heredity.
He talks about the crash.
Yes, I love that image. He says the cross is where God and sinful man merge with a crash. It's this violent, necessary collision that opens the way for God's life to enter ours. It's not just that Jesus forgives your past sins, as wonderful as that is. It's that he imparts a completely new nature, his nature, to you.
And this connects to another really subtle distinction he makes between innocence and purity. I've never really thought about the difference before.
This is a subtle but incredibly important point. Chambers says, innocence is a child's attribute. It's ignorance of evil. You could say Adam and Eve were innocent before the fall. They didn't know evil. But God doesn't want us to just be innocent. He wants us to be pure.
And purity is different how?
Purity is a moral achievement, or rather, it's a moral standing that is maintained by God's grace in the very face of temptation and evil. He warns against what he calls innocent ignorance. He says, if you trust in your own innocence, oh, I'm a good person, I would never do that terrible sin I see on the news, you are living in a fool's paradise.
Because you don't know what you're capable of.
You have no idea. You are capable of anything given the right pressure. We must trust the redemption of Christ, not our own natural goodness.
He says God demands that our very disposition be altered.
Right. Not just that we do good deeds on the outside, but that our internal mainspring, our motivation, our desire, is changed from the inside out. He wants us blameless in our motives. And Chambers is absolutely adamant. This is impossible without the atonement being applied by the Holy Spirit. You can't discipline yourself into pure motives. You can't read a self-help book and fix your heart. You need a heart transplant.
One of my absolute favorite concepts in this whole section is the idea of unconscious holiness.
I love this one too. It's so freeing.
It is, because usually when we think of holy people, we think of individuals who walk around looking very pious, very aware of how good they are.
The stained glass voice.
Yeah.
Always speaking in hushed, reverent tones.
Exactly. But Chambers says that's not it at all.
He says, if you are looking at your own holiness, if you are constantly checking your spiritual temperature, you aren't holy. You're just self-centered. True holiness is unconscious. You are so focused on God that you aren't even aware of the effect you are having on other people.
The August 21st entry calls this the ministry of the unnoticed.
And he used that beautiful analogy from John's gospel of rivers of living water flowing from the believer. He says, you don't look at the outflow, you look at the source. If you start examining the outflow, look how much good I did today, look how patient I was, look how holy I'm becoming. You lose the touch of the Lord. You become, in his words, a prig.
A sanctified prig.
Which is the absolute worst kind. Real spiritual influence is like light or salt. It just is. It doesn't announce its presence. It doesn't take selfies to prove its impact. It just changes the environment it's in.
Okay, so we surrender everything. We stop trying to play God. We receive this new life. And then everything is perfect and happy and easy right now.
Laughs. If only. That would be a nice story, but it wouldn't be true. And that brings us to section 4. Because Oswald Chambers is nothing if not a realist. Remember, he lived in a time of war. He ministered to soldiers. He knows that life is gritty.
Section 4, faith in the drudgery and the cloud.
This is where Chambers really meets us in our Monday through Friday lives. He talks about the discipline of drudgery.
Cleaning boots, washing dishes, answering emails, the stuff that makes up 90% of our actual lives.
Exactly. He says life isn't all mountaintop visions and dramatic spiritual breakthroughs.
Yeah.
Most of life is cleaning boots. And his profound point is this: God is in the drudgery.
There is a quote that really stands out. Drudgery is the touchstone of character.
It's easy to feel spiritual at a big worship concert with the lights and the music. It's easy to feel spiritual on a beautiful retreat in the mountains. But the test, the touchstone is, can you maintain that conscious contact with God when you were doing the laundry, when you were filling out tedious spreadsheets, when you were stuck in traffic for the 3rd time this week?
He asks that incredibly convicting question in the January 20th entry. Are we fresh for a prayer meeting, but stale for cleaning boots?
Oof. Yeah. If you are, he says, there is something fundamentally wrong with your relationship with God. Chambers insists that we have to find God in the commonplace. If you can't find him there, you haven't really found him at all. You've just found a religious feeling.
But what about when it's not just boring? What about when it's dark? When God feels a million miles away? He talks about the cloud.
The clouds and darkness. This is from the January 2nd and 3rd entries. He references Psalm 97, which says, clouds and darkness are round about him.
And usually we interpret clouds as bad things, right? Problems, obstacles. Our prayer is, God, please remove this cloud from my life.
But Chambers completely flips that on its head. He says the clouds are the dust of our Father's feet.
That is a beautiful image.
It means the clouds are a sign that he is close. He is on the move. He says clouds are not accidents to be avoided. They are the very condition of his presence in our lives.
He also talks about the discipline of dejection.
Yes. He says that often when we feel dejected or depressed spiritually, it's our own fault. He calls it a spiritual lust for an answer.
A lust for an answer.
We want God to explain himself. We want him to show us the map, to tell us why this is happening and what the outcome will be. And when he remains silent and doesn't show us the map, we pout. We get dejected.
We want to know what he's doing.
And Chambers says, he will never tell you what he is going to do. He reveals to you who he is.
That is a massive distinction. Say that again.
God does not tell you what he is going to do. He reveals to you who he is.
Because if he told you the plan, you would just trust the plan.
Exactly. And he wants you to trust the person. He wants you to learn to trust his character, even when you can't trace his hand. That's real faith. Faith is not the absence of clouds. It's trusting the one who is in the cloud.
So what is the practical takeaway then? When we are in the cloud, when we are in the dark, when life is just drudgery, what do we do?
It's very, very simple and very undramatic. Do the next thing.
The next thing, that's it.
That's it. Don't look for a spiritual thrill. Don't panic and try to manufacture a feeling. Just do the duty that lies nearest to you. Read the Bible even if it feels as dry as dust in your mouth. Pray even if it feels like you are talking to the ceiling. Wash the dishes. Change the diaper. He says the compulsion of God, the leading of God, most often comes to the simple ordinariness of life.
It's the C word again. Consistency.
Or maybe just faithfulness. Simple, plodding faithfulness.
So we have moved through this journey of surrender, the trap of service, the reality of sanctification, and finding faith in the drudgery. Where is this all heading? What is the ultimate goal of all this spiritual surgery?
That takes us to the final section, section 5. The ultimate goal, identification.
Identification.
Identification with Jesus Christ.
Yeah.
This is the destination.
And here we circle back to that idea you brought up earlier, loving Christ versus just using Christ.
Yes. In the March 11th entry, Chambers identifies what he calls a commercial spirit in a lot of religion.
What does he mean by commercial? Like transactional?
Exactly. We treat God like a spiritual vending machine. We go to him for what he gives. We want peace. We want joy. We want to be better people. We want holiness.
Yeah.
And Chambers basically says, stop it.
Stop wanting holiness. That sounds completely wrong. Isn't that the whole point?
He says to stop wanting holiness as a thing to possess for yourself. He has this line that cuts right to the bone. He says the prayer of the self-centered heart is, Lord, I don't want thee. I want myself clean.
Wow. That's subtle, isn't it? Because on the surface, wanting to be clean sounds like a good, holy desire.
It sounds incredibly noble. But if the ultimate goal is my clean self rather than God himself, it's just a higher form of selfishness. It's narcissism with a halo. The ultimate goal is not self-improvement. It's a personal sovereign preference for Jesus Christ himself. Abandonment isn't for us so we can get holy. It's for him, simply because he is worthy.
And the final image he leaves us with, the picture of what this completely devoted life looks like. It goes back to that idea of wine.
Broken bread and poured out wine.
We mentioned it earlier, but let's go deeper into that. What does it really practically mean to be poured out wine?
It means being consumed. It means being used up for the sake of others. Chambers uses this powerful, unforgettable metaphor. You cannot drink grapes.
No.
Grapes are beautiful. They are round, they're smooth, they're self-contained, they look great in a bowl. But as long as they remain grapes, they can't quench anyone's thirst. They have to be crushed to become wine.
And we are the grapes.
We are the grapes. And Chambers says the hard, unavoidable truth is that God often uses difficult people and difficult circumstances as the finger and thumb to crush us.
That is not a comforting image. God using that annoying boss, that difficult relative, that financial struggle as the finger and thumb to crush us.
It's not comforting to our flesh, no. But he argues it is the only way to become wine. Chambers says if we escape the crushing, if we run away from the difficulty, if we play amateur providence on ourselves and shield ourselves from all pain, we just remain marbles.
Marbles. Hard, unyielding, unbreakable, but not useful for nourishment.
Exactly. We don't feed anyone. We just roll around, polished and useless. But if we allow God to use the pressures of life to crush us, we become wine. We become nourishment for others.
And this leads to what he calls the ultimate devotion, I think it's in the February 9th entry, to be sucked dry.
Yes. To allow yourself to be sucked dry by the needs of others until they learn to feed on God for themselves.
That is so intense. It sounds utterly exhausting.
It is the example of Jesus, isn't it? He was the ultimate broken bread and poured out wine. He was constantly being consumed by the needs of others, yet he was sustained by his intimacy with the Father. And Chambers says, he calls us to that same life, not a life of self-preservation, but a life of being joyfully spent.
So let's just zoom out for a second and look at the whole picture we've painted. We started this deep dive with the warning that this book is dangerous, and I think we can really see why now.
It dismantles the self. It systematically takes apart our ego, our pride, our desire for recognition, our desperate need for comfort.
It all starts with that white funeral, that crisis of surrender, where we, once and for all, bury our own independence and our right to ourselves.
And from there, it moves us away from that commercial service, trying to earn points with God, and toward an unconscious holiness where we finally stop looking at ourselves in the mirror.
It teaches us to find God in the drudgery, in the mundane boot cleaning and dishwashing of life, and to trust him in the clouds when we can't see the way forward at all.
And finally, it calls us to the ultimate goal, to be crushed like grapes, to be so identified with Christ that our very lives become food and drink for a hungry and thirsty world.
It really is a complete reorientation of what it means to be a Christian. It's not a program for how to have a happy life. It's a manual for how to be his utmost.
That's it exactly.
Yeah.
It fundamentally shifts the center of gravity of your universe from me to him.
Before we wrap up, I want to leave our listener with a final thought, something to chew on that maybe pushes this whole idea even one step further. We've talked about being crushed, about becoming wine, but there's a question lurking underneath all of this.
And that question is, are you willing to be unnoticed?
Unnoticed.
We live in an age of platforms, of personal brands, of influencers and viral moments. Even in the church, we celebrate the big, the loud, the visible. But my utmost for his highest challenges us with the radical idea that the highest form of devotion might just be total, complete obscurity.
The doormat that we talked about at the very beginning.
Right. Are you willing to be the person who paves the road for someone else to travel on and gets none of the credit? Are you willing to be the soil that a great seed grows in? The soil is never seen, it's walked on, it's dirty. But without the soil, there is no fruit.
That is the ultimate test of the white funeral, isn't it? If the old self is really and truly dead, it doesn't care if it gets credit. Dead people don't care about applause.
Precisely. The final test of a saint is not success or influence or recognition. It is faithfulness in human life as it actually is. It's staying true to God when the camera is off, when the applause has died down, and when the only thing left in front of you is the next thing.
So as you go about your day today, whether you're in a boardroom or a laundry room, whether you feel like you're in the spotlight or lost in the shadows, maybe ask yourself that question. Is it my utmost for my highest? My career, my reputation, my comfort? Or is it, truly and without reservation, my utmost for his highest?
Shut out every other consideration.
Thank you for diving deep with us. We'll see you next time.